Supporters of charter schools have always valued the school's independence in trying different approaches to education. Now, the Pioneer Institute, a recognized leader in the charter school movement, has issued a report on preserving charter school autonomy. Here to discuss the details of that report is Jamie Gass, the Institute's director of the Center for School Reform. Jamie, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Jamie, as you well know, charters have been very successful, so they have long waiting lists. Now, one of the report's recommendations calls for removing or revising backfill or waiting list provisions. If some kids have to leave a charter school, say their families move, why not let others off the waiting list in right away? Parents like these schools. Why not make more people happy?
No, I absolutely agree. So there are about 45,000 students that are on charter school waiting lists statewide in Massachusetts, and some schools, like the Sabbath School out in Springfield, has 3,000 students for just one school. And so we believe that the backfilling or slowing down or abridging of access through wait list is really an ill-considered way to impede student participation.
In favor of it? Oh.
We're absolutely in favor of getting rid of any of these backfill provisions. See, what happened is that in 2010, when they lifted the cap on charter schools, they added a variety of these sort of bureaucratic measures to, in a way, give back to the school districts things that they had always wanted in exchange for the cap lift. And the backfill, as well as a lot of regulatory sort of underbrush, was added to the charter environment at that time.
Now, another recommendation is to to raise the cap on the number of charter schools. Of course, this allows more access to families, more access to students. The questions are we getting close to a tipping point where it's more incumbent upon the charters to address the needs of language learners and special needs kids? This is a large portion of the urban population.
No, it's true. So as I mentioned, there are these enormous wait lists. There is an incredible demand for charters. They have dramatically outperform the students in their sending districts, and in some instances there are students that are in schools that are outperforming schools in Boston that are outperforming students in schools in Weston, some of the highest performing schools in the state. And that's why we believe a statewide cap lift is really necessary. We have strong polling data that was developed last spring by David Paleologos, very respected pollster, that illustrates that there's actually much broader and deeper support among the general population in Massachusetts for a cap lift than we even knew before.
But with regard to these, to follow up on that, on these language learners, special needs kids, what's the fairest way to raise expectations on charters in this regard? We're talking about a lot of students that aren't all that represented in charters.
Right. Well, I think that the two things is that a lot of the reasons why charters don't serve as many special needs students is that we essentially have a choice-driven special education system in Massachusetts. We have among the most generous special education laws in the country, and I think what you're seeing is that parents of special needs students are very happy with the quality of the services that they're receiving in the traditional public schools. Now, in the area of English language arts, there's, English as a second language, students, there's no question that there's an opportunity for charters to continue to work to recruit students in those demographics. But I think the thing that's important to keep in mind is that charter enrollment is determined by a lottery. So it's not something where the charter leaders can pick and choose what demographics are served. They have to choose from the students that are participating in the lottery itself.
Do you think that the size of some of the public school districts gives them sort of economies of scale when it comes to dealing with some of these special needs students, where a charter may not have that?
I think that's true. I think that the first thing is that the districts have been around a lot longer than the charter schools. The charter schools have been around for about 15 years or so, and we have some of the best charter schools in the country, and they do serve special needs students. And in some instances, they remediate them off of what they call the IEP, which is the Individualized Education Plan. But I think that there's no question that the districts have been around longer. They have an incentive. There's a financial incentives for districts to hold on to special needs students. And the special education lobby in Massachusetts is very powerful. I mean, we, in fact, have about 5% more than the national average of special needs students. So we have a very active and well advocated for a special education population in Massachusetts.
Now, the report calls for support for startup and maintenance. Maybe this is kind of a devil's advocate question, but wasn't the original idea that charters would be a different approach that could do better by not just throwing more money at public schools? It was kind of what the kids were taught and by whom and how.
That's true, and I mean, the charter schools really participate in a grand bargain, which is they have more accountability in exchange for more independence or autonomy. That is to say, if they don't perform measured by their charter or by MCAS performance, that they oftentimes are either shut down or their enrollment is dialed back. And the thing about about these various limitations that are that people try to put on charters is that they're really trying to kind of curtail or pull back the participation. And the facilities is one way in which the urban districts can do that. So the Boston Public Schools have a variety of facilities that are available, in fact vacant. Rather than relinquishing that back over to a charter school that's trying to expand, they just hold on to it. And in point of fact, the Archdiocese does the same thing. They have dropping enrollment in their schools. And one of the ways in which they, too, who are competing with the charter schools, curtail or block charter expansion is not releasing empty school buildings. And so, charters receive much less state funding than traditional public schools, and one of the big reasons is the facilities. And so we think it's actually in interest of fairness that these schools, these proven schools, these charter schools, are able to enjoy the same facility and access to facilities that state schools are too.
Charters certainly do need access. Some people might point out that Boston public school population is rising and maybe we close too many schools and maybe we aren't just holding on to them. But just try to move on as I near the end of this. The law on the in-district charters in 2010 required union approval and school committee approval. You want to change that now. If you change the rules, maybe these folks won't want to play. I mean, what are you worried about? Are you worried about hostage taking?
Well, I think what's happened is, and I think the architects of the education reform law, Tom Birmingham and Mark Roosevelt and Bill Weld, really provided in that original law opportunities for districts to have charter-like autonomy. So 80, 90 cents of every dollar spent at the school level, school-based budgeting, etc. And then we've had these Horace Mann charter schools and pilot schools, and now we have innovation schools. And it's looking more and more like these in-district models are ed reform for the adults rather than the students, because they have not performed, and in point of fact, a lot of the Horace Mann models or the pilot models haven't really been capitalized on. So it's an underutilized resource, and what we think is to maybe get this in-district model up and going is that they need to clear away some of the regulatory dimensions of them and have them better emulate the Commonwealth Charter School that we know are so successful.
And one last real quick one. You guys want a funded charter school office. This might sound to some like talking about boxes on an organization or part, but charters have been pretty successful for the most part. So real briefly, how will this help ensure that the success continues?
The key to the quality of charter schools in Massachusetts has been our very rigorous charter authorization process. And in the last 5 or 6 years or so, that process has become more politicized and more muddied. We believe that creating an independent charter school authorization office will help ensure the rigor and quality and merit of applications. We want to make sure that there are good quality accountable charters, and in order to do that you have to have an independent accountable charter school office.
Thank you so much. We've learned a lot about charters. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks.